a lot of people say that there are contradictions in the Bible. This one is a very specific one, and you might be thinking, well, it's so specific, what does it even matter? But people are saying that this is a contradiction, and because of that, we shouldn't trust the Bible. How many of Aaron's offspring returned from Babylon? You may think you don't care, but a lot of people say that there are contradictions in the Bible, and we want to address that. So, my name is Craig, and this is Morning Star Quest, where we are journeying on through the Bible, one question at a time. And so, today's question is a very interesting one. How many of Aaron's offspring returned from Babylon? And I just want to say that there are 439 that atheists have put out that said that there are contradictions in the Bible, and we shouldn't trust the Bible. However, I'm going through one a week, and I'd love you to join me because this is such an interesting investigation that I'm doing here. It's probably going to take me 8.5 years. But really, where do we start with this? How many of Aaron's offspring returned from Babylon? Well, we have already done part of this because this one keeps coming up, and I guess it still needs to be addressed. And we need to get down to the bottom of this. You may think, who is Ara? Let's get down to the main point here. So, Cosmo, this is Cosmo, by the way, can you give us some details of who Ara is?
Sure, Craig. Ara is mentioned in the genealogies in Ezra and Nehemiah, specifically as a leader of a family group returning from Babylon. The discrepancy between the numbers in Ezra 2:5 and Nehemiah 7:10 is what people point to as a contradiction. This difference might stem from a variety of reasons, such as different counting methods or groups being counted at different times. What do you think?
Well, see, here's the thing. Okay, I think we need to get a bit more back history here a little bit because I don't think it really makes sense. The people of Israel have been cast out or taken out from their promised land to Babylon. 70 years later, they return. Now, when they first return, Ezra takes a census. Then, I think it's 10 or 13 years later, Nehemiah takes a census. The numbers are different.
Right. So the context here is that these are two separate census events taken at different times. The numbers differing might reflect changes in population, such as births, deaths, or even people returning at different stages. Understanding this background...
Sorry, we're gonna get into that. And just so you know, there is a list between Ezra and Nehemiah that, is it 13 years apart? Have we got that right?
Yes, that's correct. The census in Ezra was taken when the first group returned, and Nehemiah's was about 13 years later. This time gap can explain the differences in numbers.
And I find it interesting because we've got not just, I've got descendants of Ara all highlighted here. We've got 775 at Ezra and 652 noted down here in Nehemiah. So that's 123 less people than previous. And then we go down to the descendants of, I don't even know if I can pronounce that, Fahath Moab. So we got 212, and then we got 2,812, and then 2,818. So that's more people by 6. Descendants of Zatu, we got 945, and then 13 years later, 845. That's less than 100 people by Nehemiah's time. This is so confusing. Why would it even be different?
It's definitely puzzling at first glance. These differences might be due to various reasons, like some people returning in different waves, errors in copying, or even people passing away or being born between the two counts. It reflects the dynamic nature of population records over time.
I mean, we can say that, but people are saying this is a contradiction. All right, let's say Ezra and Nehemiah are exactly the same. There is no discrepancy. Would that be what people are wanting?
That's a great point. Even if Ezra and Nehemiah's records matched perfectly, some might still look for other discrepancies. The key is understanding the context and purpose of these records. They weren't necessarily meant to be precise like modern censuses, but to capture a snapshot of the community.
But Nehemiah, 13 years later, has the records of Ezra. It's not as if he wouldn't have them. He would have them right in front of him. Why didn't he just copy them down, number for number?
Nehemiah might have updated the records to reflect changes over those 13 years, ensuring the census was current for his time. What do you think?
Well, I don't disagree with that, but people might say it should be the same. Or would that be another contradiction in itself?
I see what you mean. The expectation might be for consistency, but differences can highlight that these records served different purposes at different times. It doesn't necessarily indicate a contradiction, but rather a reflection of a dynamic situation. Does that make sense?
Well, yes. And I find this so interesting because Ezra comes through and there are certain people that come, but a lot of people still stayed in Babylon. 13 years later, a lot of people that had stayed in Babylon are probably now arrived. And people that have arrived, in the first wave, they probably now thinking, well, you know what? It was a little better where I was. I'm going to go back.
Absolutely. And these movements over time would naturally cause variations in the census numbers. It's fascinating to see how the historical context can help explain these differences.
Would you think historians would be a little bit suspicious if they were exactly the same?
They might be. Perfectly matching records could suggest copying rather than independent verification. Variations show a more realistic and organic record of events.
Is there any record that Nehemiah himself actually did a second census and not just copying?
Nehemiah 7:5 mentions that God put it into his heart to assemble the people and register them by genealogy. This suggests he conducted his own census, not just copying Ezra's. This reaffirms that he wanted an updated and accurate record for his time.
So having different numbers really emphasizes that this is a real world event and it actually happened. Do you think I just hear some people say this is a contradiction because the numbers are different. But it is very clear that he had those first numbers, and it's very clear that he did a second census. So of course they're going to be different. And what I find really, really interesting is if we go down here, right down the bottom, there's all these different things and the numbers are different. There's plus 20 here and all the rest. And then we get down here and we keep going. Animals owned. When it came to the animals, the numbers are exactly the same. It's like, okay, I've done all the people. I don't care about the animals.
It's interesting how the animal numbers match exactly, while the people numbers differ. It might highlight the focus on the community's changes over time. This difference indeed shows the real-world nature of these events.
Well, exactly. So I think I'm pretty sure this one is busted. Every time we come down to this one, it shows that are real-world events. And like you said, Nehemiah actually did a second census. So they shouldn't be the same. They should reflect real world, what is actually happening right then and there in front of them. Contradiction has been busted. What I want to do is go through one at a time, and it's going to take me 8.5 years, 439 of these contradictions. I would love you to join me. Go click on one of those because we're journeying through the Bible, one question at a time, one contradiction at a time. And I'm finding it so much more like a Bible study. Go do something awesome for God, and I'll catch you in the next one.